Hello, everybody, and welcome to Coach's Corner. This is a discussion by coaches and industry experts, challenges, trends, and paths forward as we navigate the life of business. My name is Adam Gahabe, and I'm of FocalPoint Business Coaching of Cary. And with me, as always, is my co-host, Mike Lamb of FocalPoint Business Coaching of Utah. Today, we have a very special guest. Please, everyone, this is Jeff Lortz of FocalPoint Growth Advisors of Boston. He is also the author of The Agile Operator, which is a fantastic newsletter which can be found on Substack. So Jeff, welcome. Thank you very much for being here. And so Jeff, why don't you take a few minutes and just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to chatting today.
Yeah.
So my background is in high tech, right? So I've spent the last 25 years working in the high tech industry as an executive. Spent the past 10 years or so focused on helping private equity firms with their transformational investments, right, in their portfolio companies. Taking, as I call it, broken toys and trying to turn them into investments that they can actually turn a profit on. Which has been, a very interesting sort of, change in my career. Prior to that, I was working for some public companies, a few startups. But when I was in the private equity world, I was learning that, the challenges that the operators of these portfolio companies face are somewhat unique because of the amount of sort of pressure, right, that they have, to perform. A typical private equity investor has sort of an investment time frame of 4 to 5 years. So they'll buy into the company, and they'll typically make a lot of changes right at the management level. Bring in operators and executives, right, that they work with in the past or that they trust, and sort of clean house. And
Right.
then they set on a path to get growth out of that company, which in the past may not have achieved that kind of growth.
Right.
So that they can generate some value based upon revenue multiples and growth multiples, and then sell the company either to another PE or to a strategic advisor. So the patience level, right, of those investors is very short, right?
I wonder why.
Yes. So the time frame is short. The patience is short, and the level of sort of involvement, right, is pretty significant. So you think about it, these are bankers primarily, right, and they make investments in dozens of companies, right, that they're sort of monitoring, the progress on, and they don't always have the best sort of operational skill sets, right, to really help these operators sort of perform, right.
Okay.
So I finished my last private equity, operator role back in January of this year, and before I sort of jumped into another one, I decided to maybe take a step back and think about how I might be able to support portfolio company operators within the PE world as more of it as an advisor versus someone who's just sitting in one company trying to turn that company around. So in comes FocalPoint, right, as part of my sort of transformation into an advisory kind of role. And, I started the Agile Operator, which is really a blog about operating playbooks, right, for software as a service companies that are private equity owned. So a way for these portfolio executives to have some resources, right, to actually put some of those plays into action, right, to get that operational improvement, to unlock the growth, right, that they're trying to unlock as part of their sort of business objectives, and try to get participation, right, from the community, right, to refine those best practices and share them out. So I've had some success with that. And then as part of the services that I want to offer, right, to this sort of industry, I stumbled across FocalPoint as an opportunity to really, sort of come in as sort of a coaching angle of attack, I guess, right, with these executives, not only helping them with sort of operational playbooks, but also helping them kind of think of things in the way that they think of developing themselves along with developing the business, right? So coaching has really become kind of a sort of the new way of doing managing, I guess, right? And actually, one of the things that my last private equity sponsor did was they hosted, seminars for their operating executives and managers, and one of the seminar topics was coaching, right?
Okay.
So they were teaching their managers how to be coaches as well as managers and leaders, right, within their organizations, because it's important not just for career development, right?
Right.
But it's important for performance as well.
Yeah.
So anyway,
That's
that's
so
how I
true.
get to the chair that I'm sitting in today. It's a long way of saying I wasn't ready to jump back into the frying pan again
Yeah.
without thinking about how I might be able to kind of bring my skills and experience to the same audience in a different way.
You know, thank you. Great intro. It leads perfectly into my first question. But
Yeah.
I want to kind of sidetrack really quick because although we're all coaches here, we all come from different backgrounds. We have different experiences. We focus our practices in different areas, and I think that's one of the great things about what we can do is we can really target and go after and help all those people that are close to us. And a lot of that
Hmm.
has to do with our backgrounds, but what we do, how we do it, all follows a tried and true set of formulas and kind of strategies that is offered through Focal Point. And I think that is a great unifier for all of us, but more importantly, shows our uniqueness across the different spaces. So, once again, we have a great little topic for you today. Hope you're ready for it. Like I said, since we're all coaches, let's just jump right in here and let's get to it. So,
Let's
you
do
know,
it.
first question, Jeff, and this is given your background in your transition into coaching, what is the value of business coaching in your eyes?
Well, I think business coaching is a very broad category of things,
Yeah.
right? So I think that would be the first thing that I would say, right? And that's something that, as we've kind of gone through the introduction of Focal Point became more clear, right? So
Right.
you can take the concept of business coaching and you can apply it in, an infinite number of ways. But I think at the very core, right, coaching is sort of a different approach to solving problems than consulting would be, right? For example, right? So, but you always talk about consulting versus coaching,
Right.
and even coaching has like a continuum, right? So there's sort of teacher coaches, right? And teacher coaches are people who are have a lot of experience and are able to sort of coach someone who's got less experience into
Mhm.
having more experience, I guess, right? Or performing at a level that the more experienced person has performed at before. So that's sort of teaching coaching. And then on the other end of the spectrum is more of a facilitator, right? So someone who's coaching someone who really knows how to do their job, right? And maybe even has more expertise, right, at doing their
Right.
job than the coach. But the
Yeah.
coach's job is to sort of bring out, right, their capability and help them apply their capability in a more, productive and more performant way. And really to unlock, right, some of the things that are, they're unlock some of the capabilities that they have, right, that they're not actually applying as well as they could, right? So
Okay.
I think as we
Yeah.
go into different coaching opportunities, we see both of those kind of opportunities, right?
Mhm.
So when I go into my domain, which is software and technology companies, I have the opportunity to be a teacher coach, right? Because I do have some of those experiences, and I may be helping to coach someone who's maybe not had all the experiences I've had. But at the same time, there's a lot of folks that are peers of mine that have similar or more experience than me, right? And running a software company, for example, that still could use a coach, with my capability or anyone's capability, frankly, as a facilitator, right? Someone
Mhm.
who can help them kind of look inside themselves and
Uh-huh.
see what how they're sort of approaching problems, right? Helping them sort of talk through the problems that they have and actually solve them themselves, without you actually telling them or giving them advice on how to do it. So I think there's definitely a sort of a spectrum, and you have to walk into coaching situations and sort of recognize what that opportunity is and sort of adapt your coaching style
Right.
based upon that opportunity. But at the end of the day, right, it's a willingness to be coached, right, an understanding that I'm at one place and I want to get to another, right. I've got some objectives, right, that I want to try to accomplish. There's a reality that I'm operating within, right, that's kind of preventing me from potentially hitting my goals. There's a bunch of options, right, I can take, right, to do that, and then there's a willingness, right, to go and actually take one of those options, right, and really drive them forward. And the coach's job is to help the coachee identify what the right option is, and then hold them accountable, right, for actually kind of taking that approach, right. So that's they call the grow model, right,
Right.
um,
Right.
for coaching. So that's kind of the other opportunity, right, that exists as kind of that facilitator.
So that's great. The value is so huge for these business owners, and
Where have you seen the greatest success stories with your coaching? And where do you see it for potentially other people that you might coach?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, so when I think about, the challenge that, I'm trying to jump into the middle of, right? So these are, executives that are running software companies that are owned by very impatient owners that don't necessarily, have the operating experience that maybe, they have. There's a couple things that happen, right? Like I said at the beginning, typically when the first investment is made, they kind of clean house, right? They get rid of all the old managers because for whatever reason, it's a broken toy probably because these managers haven't done a good job, right?
Sad, but true.
So the first thing is
Build a better bicycle, right?
yeah. Let's clean out the management team. Let's bring in people that have operated in this model before, that maybe even the sponsors have worked with in the past, right? And they know their capability, and they repopulate the team with a new sort of executive team, right? So they're all about A players and finding the highest performing executives and putting them in there, the chief revenue officer and the chief product officer, and they've done this and they've done that and they've had these successes. They assemble them as a team, and then they put a CEO on top, right? Which maybe in the past was a founder, right? And now it's like a new CEO from the outside. And I've been that person before that they kind of plop in, right? And say, okay, now go run this team. So you've got a bunch of A players in the room, people that have had these great successes, right, in their career, in their specific domain. And then you mash them together onto an executive team, and you tell them, turn this business around. And then you put a CEO on top and say, okay, manage these A players into this success profile, and that's hard, right? And it's not hard because you've got good, smart people that know what they're doing. It's hard because you've got good, smart people that know what they're doing, and they have to work together. And that's the CEO's challenge, right? Is how do I build a team out of these, this collection of A players that don't know each other, have never worked with each other before, that don't really know this business, right? That well, because it's may have been historically run by the founder for 20 years, and now all of a sudden you're dropping all these people in, and they don't really understand it. So you've got to be able to kind of form a leadership team, right, that can actually hit the objectives, right, that the sponsors have, and it's hard, right, and it's hard to do because of the personalities, right, the communication styles, the lack of strategic alignment, right. So all of that is the CEO's responsibilities to sort of knit together, right. And I think having someone on your side as a CEO to help you through that, right, I think is critical. That the investors are not on your side; they're not your friend, right. The people on your team aren't necessarily your friend, right? So you don't really have any friends, right? So a coach can be your friend, right? He can be the person that helps you kind of guide your sort of problem solving, right, and be your sort of alter ego, but can also be the person that can help engage with your leadership team to help build a more healthy set of relationships and rhythms and communication processes, right, that are going to make that team work better together.
It seems like a good scenario to jump in with behavior and communication styles with this. Do you see? I know we've gone down this route a few times in our conversations, but it seems like it's just ready for that, and it needs that almost immediately.
Well, I mean,
to understand people.
Is that not why we start the majority of our coaching engagements with behavioral sciences and DISC and understanding, communication styles? Because let's be honest, guys, everything revolves around communication. I mean, Jeff, what you just described, you were given a box of parts, right? Proverbial you, right? But you're given a box of parts and you're trying to make a well-oiled, efficient machine. Pick your favorite car. Don't care, right? But as we start going through and learning and seeing and talking to multiple businesses, you start seeing that the challenges all stem and revolve around communication as that base foundational point where it's so easy to go awry, to deviate from any plans, if you have those. Crazy, right? Plan. But it's really easy to deviate with that lack of communication, because each layer that you step down the proverbial ladder, things are missed and that conversation slightly changes. So as a coach, outside of going down the behavioral sciences path, I want to try to steer clear from that. But, what are the first things you do when you partner with that CEO or that C-suite team in order to get some alignment?
Yeah, it's a great question, but I would only like footnote what you said with communication and collaboration, right?
Of
So I
course.
think
Sure.
I think communication is one part, and you can have a team that's communicating well with each other but aren't collaborating, right? So
Okay.
they're
Yep.
you know they're you know they're sitting in front of each other in the staff meeting every week, and they're nodding their head and they're saying all the right things, and they're completely sort of amicable with each other, and
Yep.
the communication is great, and then they go off and do whatever the hell they want with their organization. That's different from the strategy, right? So they're really they're managing for themselves versus for the business,
So
right?
how do you fix that? I mean, as
Yeah,
a coach, what do you do and how do you interact with your clients in order to address that?
yeah, I think it starts with having we call it a healthy management team, right? So team management team health, which is sort of like a broad sort of umbrella that kind of gets thrown over this idea that you have that good communication and collaboration, and you have everyone pulling towards the same objective. So having a plan, having a strategy, having alignment to initiatives, having cross-functional coordination, below sort of the executive level, right? So directors and VPs they're working together across the lines of the organization as well. But it does start with using tools like the assessments, right, to help flush out where there's people that aren't aligned in terms of their communication and collaboration style. So that helps a little bit, right? Because that Adam receives information or prefers to receive information in a different way than Mike does, and that's good to know, right? And Adam can adjust when talking to Mike, and that's all what we learn about in our assessments.
Yep.
But the other part of it is uncovering the things that make Mike and Adam work better together, which is knowing each other's strengths and weaknesses is one thing, but also kind of knowing that Mike's daughter is autistic, right? And one of the challenges that he has is every day he's got to take his daughter to some special school, right? And he's got these personal challenges that he's got to address. So having sort of a personal kind of relationship and understanding each other's sort of vulnerabilities and being willing to sort of expose your vulnerabilities to your coworkers is a way to build a more bonded team, right?
Jeff, I almost thought I heard this word. It was an E word. It may have been empathy, but so
Mm.
you're saying that leadership and empathy are coexisting? Those things are hand
Yeah,
in hand these days?
it is. And people think about empathy as like, so I'm a manager and I'm empathetic to my direct reports, right?
Mhm.
But when you think about like a leadership team, right, having that same sort of empathy with your peers and your colleagues, right, is what makes teams work better, right? You see it just in sports teams, right? I mean, if you got a bunch of players that are playing for themselves and their stats, right, you're going to have teams that aren't going to perform as well as ones that are actually working as a team and are supporting each other, right, as much as they're supporting their own sort of performance. So that's what a coach does, is try to build that synchronicity, right, among the team. And you can have, like you said, you're building a car, you have all the best parts, right? But if you can't put them together and then have it be drivable at the end, right, then you don't really have much.
I mean, isn't that just fleshing out details, right?
Yeah.
You talked about communication, collaboration, but it's the dynamic of how all of those things go together is what drives the productivity, and all that stems from ownership, accountability, and
Mhm.
being able to dole out or delegate out work and have those clear boundaries of who owns what, right? Because if not, you can talk all day, blue in the face, sit down face to a face, but if there's no ownership, how do you deliver? And more
Yeah.
importantly, how do you deliver consistency?
Yeah.
You can't.
It's true, and when you get an organization structure, it's very rare that a single executive, right, is fully both accountable and responsible for executing on an initiative, right? Because it always bleeds into other. You're dependent upon other
Yeah.
organizations, at a minimum, right, to hit the goals that have been assigned that you're accountable for, right? So everybody's got to own everybody's goals, right, at the end of the day, right? Otherwise, each individual is not going to be successful. right? So the ownership has to happen, at sort of the company level, right?
Yep.
And that ownership and those objectives have to be very clear, and they have to be, they have to be signed up to, right, by everyone, in an honest way, and then they have to be communicated down through the organization, right, in a consistent way. So
Don't
these are all
forget
things that
repeated.
require a lot of work, right?
Repeat.
Yeah.
Repeat, right? I mean, it's not just
yeah.
saying it once.
Yep.
It's dissemination, it's repetition, it's making sure that everyone is crystal clear, laser focused, and that messaging translates in multiple spaces. As
Yep.
you said, not everyone consumes information the same way, right?
Mm.
Right.
And the challenge, the bigger challenge and Mike, I know Adam, you came from the tech world as well.
Yes, sir.
It's dynamic, right? I mean, it does not stay the same for very long. I'm talking about days and weeks versus months and years, right? So, from week to week, right? The plan evolves, right? Because you're responding to a sort of dynamic environment that you're operating in.
Yeah.
So not only do you have to have a way of communicating, clarity through the organization in a consistent way, but you have to do it so often because there's so much change, right? So you've got to be always just doing this communication and alignment. And you could, a CEO could literally spend almost all of their time just ensuring, right, that there's, alignment and clarity and communication in the organization. And if that's all they did, right, and they had good people, then, they're going to be successful.
And even my background coming from more of like a service contractor, construction side of things, same things change day by day, hour by hour, sometimes just depending on what's going on. But yeah, and aligning that it's even harder in that industry sometimes because the communication is harder to get out and disseminated
Yep.
among people that,
It's not as prevalent,
there's not, yeah, your guys on job sites aren't looking at Slack all day and getting that communication when things are happening, So the communication has to be very clear and sent out to everyone and make sure that everyone has received it.
No, Mike, that's an awesome
so that they
point.
can collaborate.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that this dialogue highlights is business and the problems that we all face are universal. Doesn't matter the industry, the vertical, the space, the technology, the communication channels. I mean, the basis of what we do as coaches translates. And
Mm-hmm.
it all starts with this one key piece. And I know we've all alluded to it, but we as coaches, we start with listening, right? Actively paying attention to what someone is saying, posing a follow-up in response. I mean, that's how we get to know our people, and more importantly, how we get to be able to help steer those conversations, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think, this, I don't know, I'd love to hear what you guys think, but I think generationally, right, there's sort of a generation of workers now, right, that are sort of, growing, into their own, right, that, don't want to be managed, right, in the way that, traditional management styles work, right, and they're not going to be as productive, right, if they're managed in that way. And I think that's why coaching has become a little bit more popular, and why teaching managers how to have a coaching style of management is more important, because I think this generation of workers sort of respond better, right, to that type of management versus what we're used to. Us old guys are used to just sort of command and control type
Get the
of
directive and go with it.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys see that as well.
Nope.
Of course.
I see that all the time.
Of course.
Yeah.
This is something
My
I
wife
scream,
works in
right?
the education side of things, and she sees it a lot with kids and how they want to learn even now.
Of course. Listen, this can be boiled down to one simple thing, guys. Know your audience. Know who you're speaking to. No patterns, no trends. It can be cultural. It can be generational. It can be digital versus non-technology based versus face to face. Well, once again, it all boils down to know your audience.
Yep.
I mean, I'd love to tell you it's more complex than that. Hard to do, but really simple if you think about it. So listen, guys, I know we're coming up on rounding up to the 25. So Jeff, any closing thoughts?
I'm excited to be, kind of delving into the coaching world. I love the the framework and the support, right, that FocalPoint provides as an organization. It's super valuable, and I'm seeing it work with clients. So I'm just excited to kind of continue to grow the practice, and be someone who can be helpful to more than just one company at a time. So.
Well, your insights are invaluable. Mike, any closing thoughts for us today?
No, just really appreciate Jeff jumping on with us and being here. And yeah, your insight and what you shared with us is powerful.
No, this was
thanks for having
absolutely
me.
Fantastic. So Jeff, once again, awesome job. Thank you. And as always, please reach out to us, LinkedIn, email, schedule time to go chat. We will have Jeff and all of his socials in the synopsis and summary of the podcast. All check it out, reach out. And if you have any further topics for next week, next month, next year, new episodes, let us know your interest, because we're here to kind of share our knowledge and get your questions answered. So once again, Jeff Lortz, thank you so much, sir, and hope you have a fantastic rest of your week. And for everyone out there, thank you once again for listening to the Coach's Corner, and have yourselves a fantastic day. For all of us, take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, gents.